This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Nearly 3,000 people were injured in Lebanon today when their pagers, also known as beepers, began exploding throughout the country. Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon have been using pagers to communicate with each other. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
Chaotic scenes filled the streets of Lebanon as ambulances rushed to save the injured. On Tuesday, at least 8 people were killed and nearly 3,000 were injured when pagers, also known as beepers, began exploding in different parts of the country. The explosion started in the afternoon local time and continued for about an hour. For example, this man was looking at fruit in a grocery store when a small explosion came from his pocket area and he fell to the ground in pain. Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon have been using pagers to communicate with each other. And the explosions happened in areas known as Hezbollah strongholds, such as southern Lebanon, the southern suburbs of Beirut, and the eastern Bekaa Valley. However, Hezbollah reported that a young girl was killed by one of the explosions. Iran's ambassador to Lebanon was also injured when the pagers were detonated. Lebanon's caretaker health minister commented on the tragic incident.
At around 3:30 p.m. this afternoon, a large number of injuries started flowing into the hospitals. Those injured were primarily hurt after the explosion of communications tools, pagers, that they were carrying. The number of people that arrived to the emergency rooms were very large. It was clear that they were from different locations.
Residents in Lebanon also began donating blood for the thousands of people who were wounded during the pager blasts across Lebanon. Hezbollah blamed Israel for the incident and promised to retaliate. Meanwhile, residents in Israel gave their reaction to the incident.
And it's about time they will pay for what they've done and what they are doing to us in the northern border. I hope they will continue because it's our brains against their muscles, and I think our brains will win.
They have to show us what they have, because what they got now is something that it's a shame for them.
All of our enemies should be afraid of what our capability can and should be, and I think that can ignite your imagination about all this James Bond operation. Personally, I'm afraid. I want the hostages to come back as fast as possible, and this kind of attack only furthers them coming back to us.
State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said the U.S. was not involved in the incident, and they are currently gathering more information about it. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Fighting in Europe continues. Russia and Ukraine exchange fire on both sides of the border today. That's as social media platform Meta decides to completely ban a Russian state media outlet. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pastar has the Russia update.
On Tuesday, Russia said it repelled 5 new attempts by Ukraine to pierce through the Russian border. Ukraine has now reportedly carried out 26 incursion attempts in less than a week. It first entered the Kursk region in August. Last week, Russia began a counteroffensive in the area. Over in Ukraine, authorities say Russia attacked energy infrastructure in the city of Sumy. The strikes allegedly caused a fire at a power substation. This cut energy to almost 300,000 people. Electricity was partially restored later. And just a day prior, on Monday, Russian President Vladimir Putin commanded the army to expand by 180,000 troops to bring the total number to 1.5 million. This would make Russia's army the second largest, only behind China. The US army is in third place. On Tuesday, NTD asked the State Department what the US thinks about Russia's move.
First, it's another sign of the desperate choices that Putin has had to make to sustain this war. You've already seen it be an extraordinary drain on the Russian economy. You've seen Russia pay an extraordinary cost in deaths and casualties.
The White House was asked about plans for peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. Germany recently proposed inviting Russia to such talks.
Certainly, Ukraine has to be involved and make sure that they're at the table.
And in the US, Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, is banning Russian state media RT. Now, this comes after the US government alleged that RT engages in covert influence activities around the globe. And this includes aiming to influence the US presidential election. Meta had already limited how RT could run ads on the platform and reduce the reach of RT's post. Now Meta says that after careful consideration, we expanded our ongoing enforcement. A spokesperson for the Kremlin was asked about the ban.
Very, very negative. This is an undisguised discrediting of Meta, so Meta discredits itself with these actions.
Meta says enforcement of the ban is going to roll out over the coming days. Ariane Pastar, NTD News.
Just 2 days after the latest assassination attempt, former President Trump is back on the campaign trail and holding a town hall tonight in the battleground state of Michigan. It comes as his running mate calls for Trump to get the same level of protection as a sitting president. NTD's White House correspondent Arraez brings us the latest from Trump's town hall in Flint, Michigan.
At around 7 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, former President Trump will hold a town hall right behind us here in Flint, Michigan, and this will be his first public campaign event after the apparent assassination attempt on the past Sunday. Meanwhile, Trump earlier today met with local law enforcement who caught the suspect on a highway.
Down the line. Thank you very much.
And here it's a packed stadium, but its indoor environment will help to allow for better control over who gets to come in and what they can bring in. Secret Service has said that they're evaluating the situation on the ground constantly to decide on the level of security needed to protect Trump. And Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, today said that Trump should have the same level of protection as President Biden, adding that the media should tone down its rhetoric.
To the media, to everybody that has been attacking this man and trying to censor this man for going on 10 years, cut it out or you're going to get somebody killed.
It comes as the Justice Department says,
we are grateful that he is safe. We will spare no resource in this investigation.
But Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Tuesday said that Florida is launching its own state investigation to ensure a fair and transparent probe.
We'll see how it was that this guy was able to burrow himself in the bushes for apparently 12 hours. We are in a better position in the state of Florida to be able to provide answers to the public.
And tonight's town hall will be moderated by Trump's former White House press secretary and Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Trump will be taking questions from the audience and talk about the auto industry in Michigan as well as inflation. Of course, we do expect him to talk more about the latest apparent assassination attempt. Reporting from Flint, Michigan, Arraez, NTD News.
Vice President Kamala Harris does her first live interview with journalists since starting her campaign. She also called former President Trump to say that she's grateful he's safe. NTD's Jason Blair brings us the latest.
Vice President Kamala Harris sat down for a live interview in Philadelphia with 3 members of the National Association of Black Journalists on Tuesday. Prior to this, Harris's major media interviews have all been pre-taped, making this her first unedited talk since starting her campaign as president.
As Attorney General, I was of California, 5th largest economy in the world. I was acutely aware that my words could move markets. When you are bestowed with a microphone that is that big, there is a profound responsibility that comes with that.
Previously, Harris was in talks to attend the association's annual convention in July. She couldn't make it due to scheduling conflicts, according to the association's president, Ken Lemon. In a pre-taped Spanish-language radio interview that aired Tuesday, Harris made additional comments on the second Trump assassination attempt, saying we have to have civil dialogue and discourse. We have to be able to talk through our differences, and violence has no place. Her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, also addressed the incident on Tuesday while campaigning in Georgia, saying he's grateful that the president is safe, and I think all of us know we don't solve our differences in this country with violence. We condemn it in all its forms. We solve our differences at the ballot box. Harris also said she called Trump on Tuesday afternoon.
I checked on him to see if he was okay.
Yeah.
And I told him what I have said publicly. There's no place for political violence in our country.
Also on Tuesday, Harris received another endorsement from a popular musician. Billie Eilish posted a video on social media saying that Harris is, quote, fighting to protect our reproductive freedom, our planet, and our democracy. And this week on Wednesday, Harris is scheduled to speak at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute in Washington, D.C., before attending a Hispanic Heritage Month reception at the White House the same evening. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Both Democrats and Republicans say they support access to in vitro fertilization, but Congress has so far been unsuccessful in addressing the issue. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more on why today's second attempt at an IVF bill failed.
Senate Democrats today forced a second vote on their Right to IVF Act after Republicans had already tanked it on the first vote in June.
Today, our Republican colleagues get their second chance, either to stand with American families that struggle with infertility or stand with Project 2025 in the quest to roll back all reproductive freedoms.
All Republicans said they support IVF in a June letter, but they voted again today, 44-51, to sink the Democrats' bill, an outcome that GOP senators argued Democrats wanted.
That's what the Democrats have done. Their objective, their goal, is to have their partisan bill fail so that they can use it for political campaigns across this country.
If they really cared about women and parents who were wanting to bring a child into the world and they want to give them certainty, they just don't want something to campaign on, I think we'd be the first two people you would come talk to figure out how to have a path forward. No one has spoken to me. It's so disingenuous.
The two Republicans introduced a bill of their own to protect IVF. However, Democrats shot it down. Senator Murray said the GOP bill lacks clarification on the big question of when life begins.
And this bill is silent on fetal personhood, which is the biggest threat to IVF.
IVF treatment has come to the forefront during this campaign season. Democrats say it's endangered after the overturn of Roe versus Wade left healthcare providers hazy.
What are we supposed to do if our state says these embryos are living, breathing people? Do we have to do this process in another state? What is our legal risk here?
The confusion came to a head when the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that IVF-created embryos are considered unborn children. But Republicans have pushed back that the state's GOP-led legislature quickly cleared up the issue, and IVF is legal in all states. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The investigation into the Titan submersible continued today. The Coast Guard is investigating how the experimental vessel imploded deep in the ocean. NTD's David Lamb reports.
The Titan submersible disaster claimed the lives of 5 people last year. During Tuesday's testimony, former OceanGate employee David Lockridge was questioned. OceanGate is the company behind the vessel. The company's CEO died in the wreck he was piloting. Lockridge today said the CEO had crashed a vessel prior to the Titan incident.
He came straight down, hard on the bottom. No trimming, no ballast, nothing. Smash straight down on the bottom. It shouldn't have got to the stage it got to. If he in any way had behaved like any other submersible pilot I know and looked at his surroundings, talked on the radio, on the communications, let the topside know so there's an issue. He didn't do it.
Lockridge said the tragedy could have been prevented if a federal safety agency had investigated his complaint. He frequently clashed with the company's CEO, Stockton Rush. Lockridge also labeled the Titan vessel unsafe before its fatal voyage in June last year.
I just held my torch and took a photograph of one of the sections of the hose. You could see all the way through it. It was like porous paper. It was disgusting. When I saw this, when I saw the imperfections in the hull itself, I highlighted this repeatedly, and I was constantly put down about it. It'll be fine, the glue will hold it together. Really?
The Coast Guard will continue its public hearing for nearly 2 weeks, with the next hearing on Thursday. David Lamb, NTD News.
Rapper Sean Diddy Combs has pleaded not guilty following the announcement of a federal indictment in the Southern District of New York. Prosecutors allege the music mogul orchestrated a years-long sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more. And a warning, this report includes content that some viewers may find disturbing.
Nearly 6 months after federal agents raided the homes of Sean Diddy Combs in Los Angeles and Miami, the 54-year-old was arrested on Monday evening in Manhattan. The indictment detailing the charges was unsealed on Tuesday morning. That same day, he appeared in federal court in the Southern District of New York.
The indictment alleges that between at least 2008 and the present, Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct.
The indictment claims that Combs led a racketeering conspiracy using his business empire to commit crimes like sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. It also alleges he abused and exploited women and others for years in various ways.
As alleged, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sexual performances with male commercial sex workers, some of whom he transported or caused to be transported over state lines. Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, and he often electronically recorded them.
Those activities allegedly spanned several days, involving multiple sex workers and various narcotics like ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB. Combs allegedly supplied these drugs to the victims to maintain their obedience and compliance. Since the raid, additional individuals have filed lawsuits against the rapper, accusing him of physical and sexual abuse. Former NYPD homicide detective Peter Forcelli told NTD that he expects more people to come forward and face charges related to this case.
They're going to look at co-conspirators. I would not be surprised if superseding indictments come out charging additional people. And then there was also something else that I haven't seen in years in a federal case. They actually put out a hotline for people who may have been witnesses or potential other victims of Mr. Combs to call. And I would not be surprised if that phone is ringing off the wall.
Combs' attorney provided an update following the court hearing.
I spent the evening with him. I was with him until about 1 o'clock. His spirits are good. He's confident. He is dealing with this head on, the way he's dealt with every challenge in his life. And he's not guilty. He's innocent of these charges.
A conviction on all charges could lead to a mandatory 15-year prison term with the potential for a life sentence.
There's really no deal that the U.S. Attorney's Office can offer, and it's certainly not one that Diddy will accept. It would involve decades in federal prison. We're talking about mandatory minimum sentences of 10 years for both the drug charges and the sex trafficking.
Prosecutors initially sought no bail, while Combs' lawyers proposed a $50 million bond with home detention and electronic monitoring. However, the U.S. magistrate judge, Robin Tarnowski, ordered Combs to be held without bail in his federal sex trafficking case. Christina Corona, NTD News.
The House of Representatives is set to vote on a continuing resolution this Wednesday, hoping to avoid a partial government shutdown on October 1st. The right flank of the Republican Party is also set to elect its new chairman of the Freedom Caucus. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on what's happening.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has decided to put his funding stopgap bill to a vote this Wednesday. Through social media, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said that we owe this to our constituents. We will move forward on Wednesday with a vote on the 6-month CR with the SAVE Act attached. Some House Republicans support attaching conservative priorities to the funding battle and punting it 6 months into the future until the next president takes office.
We're doing exactly what we have lost every single fight when it comes between the upper and lower chamber. And it's because we don't have the intestinal fortitude and we don't have the political moral courage to say, you're really going to try and play this game of chicken with us? We're willing to go ahead and do that.
Other House Republicans believe the vote is a messaging ploy and oppose the plan.
He completely betrayed Republicans with passing a 2-part omnibus in May that totally funded the Democrats' agenda. So putting up a fake fight, promising something that Republican voters really want, an election integrity bill, but then being unwilling to really fight for it, is a very poor choice for the speaker.
We've passed the SAVE Act. I'm not sure why Republicans are negotiating with ourselves to try to get the Democrats in the Senate to vote for it a second time, because it's sitting on Schumer's desk.
The House Freedom Caucus, whose members are not publicly listed but account for more than 40 votes in the House, will select their next chairman this week. The two leading candidates have opposing views on the funding battle. Congressman Andy Biggs from Arizona was one of two Republicans to vote against the continuing resolution during a procedural vote last week. And Congressman Andy Harris from Maryland has predicted a shutdown will be avoided this election season. The White House, Senate Democrats, and House Democrats have expressed their opposition to the Speaker's plan. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Coming up in January, TikTok will have to make a decision either to cut its ties to the Chinese Communist Party or face a ban in all U.S. app stores. As the deadline approaches, what do Americans think about the potential ban? NTD's Sam Wong was right outside the Capitol to hear from them.
What do you make of a potential TikTok ban?
Well, if it's what they really say it is, and China is getting all that information, we're leaving ourselves open to it, and I don't think we should do that.
I use it. I don't like everything on it. Maybe there should be a few restrictions because some of it's a little bit too much for the younger kids.
So TikTok should definitely be banned. We don't need Chinese influence in this country.
So I feel like if they ban TikTok, it's stripping student athletes away from a potential opportunity to be able to make income through TikTok, Instagram, all that. So I feel like TikTok shouldn't be banned.
TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese company, which is deeply embedded with the Chinese Communist Party. And then there's also concern that TikTok is potentially harvesting U.S. user data, and some even say that it could manipulate information and then use it to pit people against each other in this country. So what do you make of that? Do you think we should be concerned?
I think we should be concerned about all social media, not just TikTok.
I think they should be pretty worried.
I mean, I don't know a lot about technology. I don't know how they might be getting information through TikTok, but I was more worried about their balloons they were sending over our country.
Definitely, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't been paying that much attention. I just feel like maybe they should have more restrictions on it, possibly use a VPN just so you don't get your information tracked and all that.
We have to be very cognizant of what's going on with us and our relationship with China.
We don't need any big brothers in America or China or anywhere else. So get it out and ban it quickly. We cannot trust China. They've shown that. And so if we can't trust them, they shouldn't have our data. What are they doing with it? Why do they need it?
Joining us now to discuss the explosions is David Wormser, Senior Middle East Affairs Analyst at the Center for Security Policy. David, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. Now, to begin, thousands were injured, 9 killed, including a child. Now, Hezbollah is blaming Israel and vowing retaliation, but Israel has not taken responsibility for the attack. First, what's your reaction to these exploding pagers?
Well, Israel hasn't taken any, hasn't given a formal blame or credit or however you would, responsibility for it. The United States has outright said it's not involved and didn't know about it. So really, it's really got to be Israel. And the other thing is the behavior of the Israeli government, both before and after, suggests this was an Israeli operation, which is truly a staggering intelligence coup to plant explosives in thousands of these pagers of your enemy and incapacitate thousands of their fighters on the eve of a potentially large war. But we don't know much more about it than that at this point.
And from that intelligence standpoint, what can you tell us about the technology that could have been used to make these devices explode basically simultaneously?
Well, Hezbollah claims that they've detected PETN, which is a form of Semtex, in the batteries of these devices. Which meant that somebody planted in them 20 grams or so of Semtex. So that's, but it's Hezbollah claiming it, so we have to take it with a grain of salt. And then the override potentially through attack of the heating element or the deheating when your phone switches off because it gets hot. They could have reversed that to actually cause the phone to get hot, which triggers the explosive and so forth. So it's a sort of a cyber attack and penetration. But that's all speculation. What we do know is that the phones were provided by the Iranian intelligence structures, the IRGC, under a front company called Telerim. So somehow the Israelis have penetrated the supply chain of not only Hezbollah, but of the IRGC and Iran itself. And this obviously has to be a terrifying concern for the Iranian regime. And it begins to tell you where we might be headed going forward with Israeli capabilities in terms of against Iran, not just against Hezbollah.
I want to get to that point, but first, with this switch to, say, low tech following the recent targeted assassinations of Hezbollah operatives, how will this exploding pager attack impact how Hezbollah will plan and coordinate future military attacks?
Well, there's a lot of head scratching in Israel tonight as to why the Israeli military hasn't initiated. Everybody's expecting a major war within days. Hezbollah's been rocketing northern Israel for months, with 40-some killed, 80,000 to 120,000 people removed from northern Israel, unlivable, 30,000, 40,000 acres of forest burned. The Israelis made a decision, more or less, in the last few days that a major war is necessary to distance Hezbollah from the border. What this does is it does three things. First of all, how now does Hezbollah communicate? The head scratching in Israel is that you have a severe vulnerability that's been inflicted on Hezbollah. Why aren't they not exploiting it? And the vulnerability includes, as I said, three things. One is the fact that the Hezbollah has no communications. The second is its command and control has been devastated. The third thing is for anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 operatives are incapacitated. And the next thing is also that you know where they are, because where these little explosions happen, you know these are Hezbollah operatives. So there's a moment of utility in this for an offensive operation that perishes very quickly if the Israelis wait. And that's the confusion in Israel. Why are they waiting?
In terms of the wider conflict between Hezbollah and Israel, will this latest attack shake Hezbollah's confidence without the need for a massive military escalation, or what can we expect to see in response?
Well, definitely. I think that's an excellent question, Tiffany. I think that it's basically shaken their confidence greatly. They must not know what to do, because everything they do might be compromised. The Israelis had such penetration; they could penetrate anything, from rockets to pagers to headphones to your iPad and so forth. So they're really in a state of fear, which impairs their ability to function. But the second thing is war is also psychological, and the preemption from 2-3 weeks ago, where Hezbollah was launching this massive attack on Israel, and all they got was hitting one chicken coop, led to 2 weeks of memes all over the place that humiliated Hezbollah. And now all of a sudden you got this, which has certain graphics to it, that memes are already flying all over. It's a humiliation for Hezbollah. And these humiliations have a tremendous strategic impact.
Now, zooming out a bit to one of your earlier points, reports are noting that Israel did not give the Biden administration a heads up on this attack, and the U.S. hasn't confirmed that Israel was in fact behind the attack. But does this affect U.S.-Israel relations, and if so, how so?
Well, there's already some tension in the American-Israeli relationship, because the United States wants Israel to full stop with Gaza, and Israel doesn't feel it's finished the job in Gaza. It wants Israel not to react to Hezbollah in Lebanon, but Israel has, as we said, unlivable situation in the northern part of its country. It needs to push Hezbollah back to come back into compliance with UN resolutions from the past. So the Israelis, in many ways, need to now achieve a decisive result, which they have concluded can no longer be achieved through the diplomatic channels. Whereas the United States thinks that only the diplomatic channel should be considered. There is no military option here that doesn't risk escalation, and that therefore Israel shouldn't do it. The Israelis, on the other hand, are saying, look, you haven't stopped the Houthis. You haven't stopped the Iraqi militias. The Houthis are flowing to Israel's borders. The Red Sea is still closed. So the Israelis are losing faith in the American security guarantee, combined with the conclusion that the diplomatic routes are really only hampering them, not helping.
And what can we expect to see in terms of an international response? What can we expect from Iran, for example?
Well, lost in all this drama was that the Iranian ambassador in Lebanon was severely wounded. We hear it blew up in his face, and he is probably blind at this point and perhaps paralyzed. We don't know really how much he's injured, but we do know that his eyes are most likely destroyed. So we know that Iran reacted to Israel for hitting a consular building that wasn't even a consular building. It was just a building next to a consular building in Damascus. And because of that, shot 400 missiles or projectiles at Israel. So we can expect the Iranians to threaten some sort of a response here. And the Israelis are waiting for it. They've anticipated this for a while. We see this whole conflict turning to its essence, which is an Iranian-Israeli war, where one side emerges surviving. And that's essentially what this is now being stripped down to.
And the November election is just weeks away. How do you see the Middle East conflicts playing out under, say, a Trump administration versus a Harris administration?
Under a Harris administration, what you'd see is what you've already seen, which is the constant pressure on our ally to restrain itself and not achieve decisive victory, which leads this conflict to just keep bubbling and bubbling and bubbling forever without a real strategic shift in the region toward Israel or its potential allies like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain. Under a Trump administration, I think the Israelis are aware that the Trump administration wouldn't be very happy with a fresh war landing on its lap the day it takes office. It has other priorities. So I think what the Israelis would do is seek a decisive victory in the next few months prior to the Trump administration and count on the Trump administration to help them out of the mess that would be created at the UN with the International Criminal Court, the supply chain issues that Israel would face. Israel would drain its arsenal and so forth. So I think it's counting on the Trump administration, if it's elected, to resupply and provide cover. If the Harris team wins, I think the Israelis are expecting just a bumpy 4 years where they just have to do what they have to do and take the lumps for it and it will drag out a lot longer with a greater cost.
David Wormser, Senior Middle East Affairs Analyst at the Center for Security Policy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Former President Trump announces a new cryptocurrency venture, World Liberty Financial. Its goal to ensure the U.S. dollar's continued dominance. Here's the story.
Crypto is one of those things we have to do, whether we like it or not. We have to do it.
Former President Trump and family announcing their new crypto venture on X Monday night called World Liberty Financial. According to an X post, its mission is to drive the mass adoption of decentralized finance and stablecoins. Stablecoins are a type of cryptocurrency designed to have a stable value. This is done usually by connecting it to fiat currency. For every stablecoin, there's a corresponding number of U.S. dollars held somewhere as collateral.
They want an alternative to the dollar or the euro or the rupee, right? They want an alternative. We all want an alternative. And this is even before alternative rock and roll.
Financial expert Vijay Marolia says blockchain technology is not going away, and stablecoins are getting a lot of attention. World Liberty Financial says that by spreading U.S.-pegged stablecoins around the world, we ensure that the U.S. dollar's dominance continues. The idea began when Trump and members of his family met with crypto entrepreneurs Chase Hero.
If you're not going through problems, you're not pushing hard enough.
And Zach Folkman.
When you want to be like the alpha lion amongst other alpha lions, you really need to step your game.
Shown here on their YouTube channel called The Watchers, they've been working with the Trumps for 9 months.
Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer now for your sports news. We're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot to discuss today, but let's start in college football as Georgia Governor Brian Kemp signed an executive order that allows Georgia schools to pay their athletes for their name, image, and likeness. Now, how much of an advantage is this, and are other states considering the same?
You know, it seems like it's pretty big, though the state of Virginia passed a very similar law earlier this summer, and we've really yet to see how or if schools like Virginia or Virginia Tech have really taken advantage of this rule. It's kind of complicated by the fact that the NCAA is currently looking to settle several lawsuits against them regarding the name, image, likeness law, and allowing all schools to pay their players is expected to be part of this current settlement agreement. Now, currently only third parties can pay these athletes, but there would be a $20 million, cap on the NCAA agreement. Virginia and Georgia would have no cap, so that would seem to be an advantage and probably something would have to be worked out if this settlement goes through. Now, it appears that the schools, they're clearly trying to figure out how they're going to afford this. We've already seen schools like Tennessee charge a 10% talent fee on all tickets to help raise money. That could soon become the norm.
Moving to NFL news, ESPN is reporting that the Miami Dolphins are placing quarterback Tagovailoa on injured reserve. This is after suffering a concussion last Thursday. Now, if true, what is the significance of this move?
Well, when you place a player on injured reserve, it opens up a roster spot for someone else to go on the active roster. But the player that goes on injured reserve has to remain there for at least 4 games. So it's not a good sign that they've made this move, because it means after evaluating him, they realize he's not going to be cleared to play anytime soon. And we've talked about his injury history before. This is his 4th known concussion in the last 5 years. That's a lot. So in his absence, backup quarterback Skylar Thompson will make the start Sunday against Seattle, while the team has signed Tyler Huntley onto the active roster, presumably as the backup. So it'll be interesting to see if Miami can stay in playoff contention. I know it's early, but Tua Tagovailoa is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So on paper, this, of course, does not bode well for them.
And looking now at Olympic news, U.S. gymnast Jordan Chiles filed an appeal over the bronze medal that she was stripped of in her Flora exercise performance earlier this summer. What is her argument here?
Well, she says that the Court of Arbitration for Sport, or CAS, has violated her right to be heard by not allowing video evidence that showed that the U.S.'s original appeal was within the 1-minute window allowed after the erroneous score was announced, and the Olympics recognizes CAS's rulings. Now, she also alleged that the president of the panel for CAS has a tie to the Romanian team, and it was a Romanian gymnast that was knocked out of medal position after they corrected Chiles' score. Now, what originally happened was that after the floor exercise score was posted, the U.S. noticed they incorrectly calculated the difficulty of her score. So when they alerted the judges, they corrected it, and then she moved into bronze position, so she got her medal and everything. Nobody, I guess, noticed that it took 4 seconds longer than is allowable for the U.S. to notice that. But then afterwards, the Romanian team appealed, said the U.S. was not within the 1-minute window, missing it by 4 seconds. I mean, honestly, you would think the more important issue is getting the score right, not whether it took 4 seconds too long, but that was not what they ruled.
Well, shifting gears to baseball, we talked last week about San Diego infielder Luis Arraez's streak of not striking out. Well, it came to an end last night after 141 plate appearances. Now, normally when we talk about baseball records, this isn't a popular one, but why is it so important?
Yeah, usually we're talking about Aaron Judge or Shohei Ohtani with hitting their home runs, and for good reason, for sure. But Arraez's streak is so impressive because strikeouts have been on the rise for so long these days. Prior to 1960, no pitcher averaged more than 10 strikeouts per 9 innings for a season. Sandy Koufax was the first. Now you're up to like 13 or 14. That's like a 50% increase just on that. And no hitter had struck out for 200 times in a season until 2008. Now it's pretty much a yearly thing that someone goes past that mark. Now, obviously, if you don't put the ball in play, you have no chance of getting a hit. But even if you don't get a hit, you can still advance the runners on a fly ball or a ground ball or even a foul out. It's called a sacrifice. So Arraez's mark, 141 plate appearances without a strikeout. This is the second long this century. Not surprisingly, as someone who sees it that well, he leads the league in batting average. Now his playoff-bound Padres are in action tonight against the first-placed Houston Astros.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.